Today we're going to go through what it takes to make an offer and kind of the major points of it. We don't have time to go through everything today because offers are typically 6 to 8 pages long and they have a lot of fine print in them that you have to go through before you make the offer. But let's talk about kind of the biggest aspects. So the first thing is, obviously you have to find the house that you want to buy, and you have to know the seller's name and the buyer's name, the legal description, and the municipal address. And we put all of that on there on the very top of the first page of the offer, so it's clear which property it is you're buying. We often put in the frontage and depth of the property too. If we know it from the land registry, we should know at least the frontage. Typically the depth is on there as well. So that just helps to identify that we're buying the right property that you want to buy, and it helps the seller know this is the property that they're selling. The next thing is the purchase price. So every situation is different for all of these things. So you need a trusted advisor that you can sit down with and go through all of these details. But the next section is the purchase price, and you've got to come up with a number that you're comfortable spending. And if you go back and forth with negotiation, that'll change. Sometimes, especially in multiple offer situations, just one is accepted. But depending on your situation, we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. The next thing is the completion date. So that's the closing date. That's the date that you transfer the money and you get the keys back. That's the happy day, that's move-in day typically. Now one thing to note is that closing can happen any time during that day up until 6 p.m. So you might not get the deal closed until 4 p.m. And if you're trying to move on that date, you can't access the property until it closes at 4 p.m. That's just something to note for reference. And you should have a realtor telling you all of this while you're doing your offers. Irrevocability is the next section. That's important, and so that's how long the offer is valid for. So there is a time limit that the seller has in order to accept your offer. They can counter your offer at any point, or we call it a sign back, where they sign the offer with usually a different purchase price, but it could be different conditions, it could be a different closing date, and they basically counter your offer. So once that happens, or once that time goes past, basically the offer is null and void and the seller no longer can accept it. They can still counter though. The other thing to consider is the deposit amount, and it'll have who the deposit is payable to. Typically it will either be the listing brokerage or it will be the seller's lawyer, and that deposit money is due usually 24 hours from the date or the time of acceptance. So often the next day you write a check for the deposit amount. Now we are seeing higher deposits than we used to here. A typical deposit now is probably closer to $5,000 to $10,000. It was very common in Sarnia, Lambton to have $1,000 deposits for a long time. Those days have kind of gone by the wayside. People want to see that you have enough cash to be able to close. And then the next section is Schedule A, and on there, that's kind of the meat and potatoes of an offer. So the first line is almost always basically the buyer agrees to pay the balance of purchase price on closing. So what that means is you've already paid the deposit, you have to pay the rest of the money on closing, and that is subject to adjustments. And those adjustments are typically property taxes. They can be rent in the terms of an income property. Let's say if you're buying on the 15th, you owe some money that way. You also owe them the last month's rent. You owe that over to the buyer as well. And property taxes, depending on whether you've prepaid for the year or you're at the end of the year and you've already, or you're at the start of the year, you haven't paid anything yet, there are some adjustments. So you pay the property taxes for the day that you owe, or the days that you own the property. So the three most common conditions are finance clause. So you should have already done a pre-approval. If you've been watching the series so far, I do stress doing a pre-approval. But they still need to fully approve the house, and that could include an appraisal of that property. All these conditions are recommended depending on your situation, and you need to work with a realtor that you can trust to give you the proper advice to protect yourself. So the first is the finance clause. Second most common clause is home inspection, and so that is where you say we need a few days, maybe a week, in order for a home inspector to come through the property and give us a report, and that report needs to be satisfactory to the buyer in the buyer's sole and absolute discretion. And it's worded that way because if you find something that you don't like about the house, you can walk away from it. The seller could say, well, it's no big deal to them, but if it's a big deal to you, then you can walk away. And the final condition is the sale of buyer's property condition, and that's one for a whole conversation based on, do you need to get your house sold in order to purchase this property? Basically, it makes one sale conditional on your sale of your home, and it also includes typically a 48-hour, sometimes 24, sometimes 72-hour escape clause. So an escape clause basically says that seller can continue trying to sell the house to somebody else, and if they get an offer that's acceptable to them, they can give you usually 48 hours to either remove all your conditions or the new buyer gets the property. There's a lot of things that go along with that, and we can talk about that more in person, but for the purposes of this video, that should suffice. Those are the three most common ones, but there's all sorts of other ones. Insurance conditions that you are going to be able to get insurance on the property. Septic and well inspections out in the country is very common. Approval from the Ministry of Natural Resources if you're putting in a dock. There's all sorts of them. So every situation is different. Work with a realtor that you're comfortable with, who knows what they're doing, and is able to and willing to fully protect you. Thank you, and have a great day. Thank you for watching my video. Please like and subscribe if you'd like to hear more from me. If you have comments, please leave them in the comment section below, or contact me. All of my contact information is beside me and below me in the description. Have a great day.